Welcome to the Wander Creative Podcast, your guide to marketing in the digital world. Episode 5, Purpose Drives Data.
Welcome back. I am Matt, and I am joined today with Dan and Katie from the Wander Creative team. Today, we are talking about how purpose drives data. So for those of you who are listening, all year long within our team internally at Wander, we have been really diving into the idea of purpose drives impact. And really what we mean by purpose drives impact is everything that we are doing, everything that we're trying to accomplish, whether that is having purpose behind the services that we offer, having purpose behind the team members that we have in place, having purpose behind the clients that we are working alongside, even having purpose on the types of posts that we're doing for those clients or the types of campaigns we're doing for those clients. If you have purpose behind what you are doing and what you're trying to accomplish, that is ultimately going to be what drives the impact, what drives the bottom line, whatever drives the objective you're doing, and really help you accomplish your goal. And so that's kind of been our mantra all this year is purpose drives impact. Let what you're doing really drive what you're trying to achieve. And so today we thought it would be kind of fun to let you, the listeners, and you, the viewers, in on kind of what we mean by that and how purpose can drive data and how really having data-driven decisions within marketing will help you inform your decisions, help you inform your strategies, and kind of help you optimize the performance. You agree with that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, and with that intro, let's dive in. So really would love to, Dan, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what does it mean to make data-driven decisions?
Mm-hmm.
We use that phrase a lot within the context of our meetings internally, and even when we're talking with potential new clients. We really want to be a data-driven company. But what does that mean, especially in the context of digital marketing?
Yeah. You can answer this in a lot of ways. And I think the way I would want to sum this up would be that you kind of have to get over what you think is best, what you think your audience wants to see, and let the numbers dictate those decisions moving forward. I know that we talk a lot, and we've talked on this podcast about how the best content is content you would like to see. If you're a content creator, the best directors have made the best movies because they'll say, I just made something that I would want to see. That's a great starting point. But so often, internally, we've seen this with our clients, we've seen this, this element of, no, I know what my audience wants. And then they kind of blindly push content that performs less good because they're not keeping a finger on the pulse of the data. And when the data comes in and you say, hey, actually turns out our audience really doesn't like this kind of content. They're really engaging with this. That's when you've made data-based, data-driven decisions. And so I think that's been a huge part of what we've seen. And I think that's been kind of a pitfall of it's tempting to think, well, I know what's best. But I think you have to lean into my audience knows best. It's kind of a customer's always right situation. So yeah, I think that's what I'd say about that.
Obviously, there's been a lot of change over the past several years, even just in the past several months, of what data can be reported, what data you can tap into, how you can use that data. So as things evolve within marketing and within digital marketing specifically, how has the role of data and the role of data tracking evolved as well?
Certainly gotten harder to get more data. It's a weird world we live in because we're gathering more than ever, but it's now starting to get harder to get than ever. So that's always going to be a battle. I think it's going to be a battle against privacy. And it's hard to tell where, iOS updates come in, where to be able to predict how restrictive it'll be. Now, in the past, we've seen iOS changes happen and quickly platforms try to go around it. Say, all right, well, these are things in place that we can do to still be able to get this data, but it's an extra step. So I do think that there will always be an opportunity, but it's seeming like we're always kind of on our toes. I don't know if there's going to be some rollout that'll protect people's data more. As a consumer, I love it. as an advertiser, I hate it.
Yeah, it's also really interesting that I feel like every platform is kind of like rolling out these, updated privacy standards. And even earlier this year, or maybe it was towards the end of last year, I can't remember the exact timing, but everyone was all consumers were super excited and advertisers were like, what does this mean? Because Google basically said, we're killing off the cookie. But I recently was listening to a podcast and reading some articles, but what most people don't realize is Google's actually within Chrome, their web browser, they're only killing off what's called a third-party cookie. So you can actually still implement Facebook pixels, and you can actually go into Facebook and say, this is a first-party tracking. And so it's like all of these, and even with Apple OS, like there's so many things where they're like, we're in for the privacy of the consumer, but then there's actually so many different ways that you can kind of, I don't want to say workaround because they're not workarounds, but obviously Apple and Google, their big marketing pitch is we're going to protect your privacy. But their bottom line is also Google makes a lot of money from advertising. And so they're trying to figure out what is that balance? What is that line? So how does that kind of tightrope impact things?
I mean, I think you nailed it when you said they are making money on our ability to receive this data.
Yeah.
I think that will always push forward and propel this idea and this need for gathering it. Now, so I don't think it needs to really be a worry of, will we ever be able to get it? But I think that you're exactly right. We see it in advertising. I mean, we joke about kind of like the Google salespeople, the Google ad specialists. It's like they want us to spend money. So they'll tell us ways that we can spend more. Yeah. And it's ways we can get more data so that we can spend more with them. It's ways that'll optimize X, Y, Z. So yeah, I think you're spot on.
Katie, within your role at Wander, you talk with a lot of clients and you're interfacing with a lot of clients, and data, even as we're sitting here, I'm like, okay, most people are either going to be geeking out with us or they're going to be like, data, boo. So when you're kind of thinking through and you're trying to talk with clients about the importance of data and the importance of analytics and why that's crucial, how are you kind of framing it to someone who might look at numbers and just get glossed over in the eyes of like, what does that even mean?
And I think it's all part of that process. It's when we're talking about purpose, it's like, okay, who are you targeting? A large audience and you're just trying to make a splash, a really niche audience, and it's a smaller group, but you can have more impact because it's really targeted.
Yeah.
Those analytics did it work? And I think that's where having an agency like Wander partnering with you walks through those analytics, because I do understand I've been someone who's gotten into back ends of platforms and went, I don't know what these acronyms are or why or care or what a good range is.
Yeah.
And so to have someone walk through with you and say, okay, this is normal, this is good, this is strong, this is what we're seeing working, let's go that way, helps to interpret, or we've got resources that will help interpret it for you if you're looking those for the first time.
Well, and to that point too, I think I love that you said like why it's crucial, and something that an agency does bring too is like we're trained to look at what it means. And I think that it can be so intimidating for people to like look at this info and just be like, all right, I have demographics, but like, what does that mean? And I think an example even within email marketing would be like, if a customer or a consumer buys product A, for some reason, they go straight from product A to buying product D or B next, or C, or whatever example you want to use. Let's say C. Then, if you're an email marketer not knowing to like keep an eye on that, you might be trying to push them to B after they buy product A. When if you looked at the data, you would say, okay, this is actually beneficial. They're actually acting this way. Their purchase behavior, so they're going here. Well, we as an agency are able and trained to look for that kind of data and look at the purchase habits.
I think people who are doing it well are going to see what are the results. I think when people just blindly go, I'm doing what I'm doing, people are going to follow me.
Right.
They might not. But I think when people are looking at results, it's helpful. I think people range in their interest in numbers.
Yeah.
Even in life, when it comes to accounting, people have different interests in how they read numbers.
Yeah.
So whether it's us translating it into English of like, this is what this means for your goal.
Yeah.
Versus we do have clients that they geek out over numbers. They want to know percentages. They want to know, like, they want the actual numbers. And so it ranges on how we communicate with clients.
Yeah.
Those numbers. We're still going to tell them the results.
Yeah.
We're just going to translate it different based on the person.
So let's talk about it from the consumer perspective for a second of like data tracking, data acquisition. Is that big, bad, scary, or is that positively impacting campaigns both for us as advertiser and our clients and also the user? Like how is that data and being able to like you said, see that someone was interested in product A, so we know they're probably going to be interested in product C.
Right.
But if we didn't have that data, then they might get recommended product B, which has nothing to do with what they're interested in, what they're looking for.
Right.
So from a consumer perspective, and I guess also our perspective, how is that beneficial for everybody?
That's
or
great.
is it?
Yeah, that's a great
or
question.
is it Big Brother? You know?
yeah. I think it's the thing to note is when you said big, bad, scary, I think it really doesn't have to be. And I do think that, yes, we are able to dive deep into data and we will make recommendations. We will make changes based on that. But when it comes to the user, I mean, an example I like to use is like being able to utilize even something like Meta's, just Meta's reports on the back end. That, if you know how to use that well, is better in the hands of somebody than GA4, but they don't really know how to use it. So it's like, I don't think it has to be a scary thing. I think you can actually start simple and say like, who is my audience? What are their core basic demographics? Move on from there. I think getting a lock on that, it doesn't need to be big, bad, scary, but I still think it's pivotal. I think if your audience is solely 40-year-old men, throwing money at 20-year-old women is not going to work for you. So I think that start simple and then move beyond that, but I don't think it has to be big, bad, scary.
I feel like it helps us target audience in a more personal way. I think with just as much digital realm as there is now, you can get lost in just that big world. And so I think to be able to say like, hey, you're a video editor, here's an ad based on video editing. Like it has this personal touch of we know you. And hopefully that doesn't come across in the scary way. And people have different preferences of what information they want out there.
Yeah.
But I think as an advertiser, as businesses reaching out to their audience, it makes it feel more personal.
Yeah.
Where it's not just, hey, we're trying to sell you resources. It's like, hey, we see you've done this. This might be your next step in the journey. It's we know you work on this or you enjoy this. This might be helpful. And so I feel like it can actually be a more genuine ability to connect with your audience than an intrusive thing.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, I even think about it from kind of the basic. We have an Alexa in our house. Sorry if you're listening.
Well, she's listening.
Yeah, she's always listening. And also sorry for if you have an Alexa in your house and me saying Alexa multiple times.
Hey, Alexa.
Hey, Alexa. Hey, Alexa. Sorry. All right. Now I just had fun. But it is fascinating that, when we run out of, say cat food, like we have a cat. When we run out of cat food, I'm always like, I can't believe we ran out of cat food. But recently she's started to know, okay, every 6 to 8 weeks, they order more cat food. And so she is using kind of that data tracking and like, okay, it's probably time now that they're in this rhythm of ordering the exact same thing every 6 weeks. I'm going to remind them, do you need more cat food? And some people are like, that's way scary. And even I'm like, do I like that she knows that I need more cat food? But then when I run out of cat food, I'm so annoyed. I'm like, where's the cat food? How fast can it get here? But I think that is something that's interesting about the entire conversation of technology being able to help track and see where you're at and be able to make it a better experience for all.
Well, and to that point, and I think we've talked about it on this podcast before. In terms of companies having our data, I would much rather, honestly, if I'm on social media or something, I would much rather get advertised things I would actually like than like kids' toys. And, I think there's an element of even personalizing our experience it actually does, if we think about it from a purpose-driven perspective, I think it actually makes a better experience for even the user than if every couple posts I see a dress for sale.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm not the audience for that. And so I think you're right. I think it actually
But I
can
think
be
there are
seamless.
steps, like you said, to as a business or an advertiser coming in to
Mhm.
grow that, because there's endless possibilities.
Right.
I think starting with less segmentation before you start going
Mhm.
deeper into that. But I do think when you really get into segmentation and you're speaking to who they are and what they need, it
Mhm.
can have a huge impact
Mm.
Totally.
because you're speaking to them.
Totally.
But it's
Yeah.
a big world that you sort of have to step into, because it also adds a lot of workload on the back end,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because you've got to change those messages so that it's accurate to who they are.
And I will say too, exactly to that point, and I know we're going to talk a lot about AI this season because it is going to be everything in the next couple years. Um, but even with that, Meta, Google, they're all recommending you start broad, like you said,
Hmm.
because their AI systems are being better at saying, hey, you can start broad and we will find the audience for you. And you'll still be able to see that on the data on the back end. But there's an interesting element with that being a crucial part of helping the advertiser, being like, hey, you can just kind of set it and then start gathering the data that comes back, the demos, the audience info. But that's huge.
Yeah, I don't want to dive too much into the technicalities of everything because I know a lot of our listeners probably, like Katie mentioned earlier, it's like, what even
Yeah.
is this abbreviation or acronym, or like, what does that even mean? But I do want to give at least some insight into, all right, now that you've kind of tapped into, here's the audience I'm going
Mhm.
after, like what should people be paying attention to in terms of the data, that their types of data,
Mhm.
key performance indicators or KPIs? Like
Mhm.
what are some of those actual practical, tactical things that people should be looking for and be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, to start, definitely demographics, just basic demographics, age, location, gender, stuff like that. Cost per action is another pretty basic one of, whether it's impressions, clicks, or whatever objective you're running, what's the cost for that? We like to keep a close eye on click-through rates. That just really allows us to be able to see, hey, is our audience the right audience? If that click-through rate is, um, you know, below 2%, below 1%, we start to go, all right, maybe we should tweak something to see if we're hitting the right audience. So that's huge. And then lastly, I would say frequency, which is to the viewers, it's the amount of times one person has seen an ad.
Hmm.
And when possible, we like to keep an eye on that too, because if that starts to spike, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but a lot of times when I see an ad too many times, I'll say, hide this ad. I don't want to see this. I've seen it too many times. But those are some of the basics. You can get a lot deeper, but yeah, for general sake, that's about it.
And we do have 2 resources on our website that has that information written down
Yeah.
of what are those benchmarks and
Yeah.
how to read them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. Like if you go to wandercreative.com and then there's a little resources tab on there, there are 2
Mhm.
different free PDFs that you can access that kind of show, all right, here's some, because I mean, a lot of people are like, okay, cool, I had 20 clicks. Is that even good? And those clicks cost $38 per click.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not good. Now, if those, so we do have, we have a couple of resources that kind of walk you through. Here's what those good benchmarks that you should try to be
Mhm.
aiming for. Now, I will say the caveat is every industry has a little bit of different things. So we
Mhm.
tried to kind of do it as a weighted average. So your numbers might not be exactly based or
Yeah.
exactly the same as what we put there. But I do think that's a good resource that we have available for free.
It's great.
Katie, you mentioned segmentation earlier. Talk a little bit with me about the importance and if it is important to do specific segmenting, and then
Mhm.
also kind of multi-testing, or what we call A/B testing, where you might have audience A gets copy and creative one version, and then audience B gets a whole different set of ads. Talk to me about that a little bit.
I think even looking at Wander, like we understand our business is we partner with other businesses like ours that are mission minded, but that's a big group.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also have social media, content creation, like we're offering different things. So we have an understanding of what our business is, but there's segments in that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're doing our own communication, the way we talk to an artist that we're doing their social media, their needs are different than someone who's needing digital ads.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at, if we were doing ads for Wander, like we can segment out like, okay, we want to be talking to people who are doing music, who are needing social media help, or we're needing to talk to small businesses that might need help with ads.
Yeah.
We can totally change that language. So it's like, no, we understand those needs are different. Here's what we have that can offer that.
Yeah.
But it's almost just that, like when you have your business of this is who we are, this is our mission. Great. Who is your audience? Who are you working with? Who are your clients? Where are they at? And being able to specify that language. So it's also, we know what you need. Here's the answer. But we wouldn't be able to do that if we were saying, hey, artist, we know what you need with social media. Here's the answer. And also small business, we know what you need. Here's the answer, because what they need is different. Their answer is different. So it enables us to be able to specifically speak to them and their needs.
Yeah, that's so good. Kind of to wrap up the entire conversation, we talked a little bit earlier about the different privacy controls that Apple, Google, even even government agencies are now putting in place, and how that can be a challenge, or how that can pose a challenge for both marketers and brands to get in front of consumers. How does the future of data collection and the restriction of that pose? Does that pose a threat to marketers and the brands that they represent? Or how can people still reach their intended audience who is willing to purchase or buy whatever they're trying to sell?
Yeah. I can speak to that. I think, if you follow us on socials, it's our desire to walk with you through that. If there are changes to platforms, if there's anything like that, I promise we won't pitch to the listener or anything tacky, but it's truly like we kind of exist to help you be able to make a splash. And so I think that a huge element is kind of like what we spoke about earlier. As long as there's money to be made on advertising, I don't think data collection will ever be a real problem. I do think that, like we have in the past, I think there will be maybe some bumps, and advertisers have to learn how to adjust. Marketers have to learn how to pivot. But I do think that, if you keep up with, follow us, follow a lot of great brands like Social Media Examiner, that will help you understand exactly when changes happen in the industry. And one last thing I'd also want to say to anyone listening is, a huge element that's so important with data collection is to build your own processes. Be keeping your eye and your finger on that pulse. But at the same time, I've heard hundreds of advertisers say different ways to collect the same data, say different ways to run the same types of ads. And I think really it's more so about you diving in yourself, looking at who's looking at your stuff, and then being able to start keeping track of it and start changing your marketing plan around it. But don't get confused by all the different ways. If I have a bunch of friends in advertising, and if I asked all of them how to do a certain thing, they would all give me different answers. And I think that can sometimes be helpful, sometimes be very confusing. And so I would just say build your own processes, and really stay in touch with marketing brands that will kind of be the first to ring that bell and let you know, hey, there's been a change in the industry. Because I think that's what's most important.
Yeah, that's so good. Again, thanks. Thank you everyone for listening. Also to reiterate, that free PDF, if you want it, that just goes over here's what some of the acronyms you might be seeing on the back end of your digital ad managers, and kind of ranges of what you should be expecting. Go download that. I think it's a great resource. Again, it's free. You can get that at wandercreative.com. Again, you can get that on wandercreative.com and tap on the resources tab there, and you should be able to find that pretty easily. And then, yeah, like Dan said, if you are trying to navigate this on your own or want more resources and more of a journey together, just follow us on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, or if TikTok's even still going to be a thing, who knows? Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on the Wander Creative Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you missed any of the highlights, don't worry. You can find all of the show notes at wandercreative.com/podcast. While you're there, consider signing up for the digital drop to get new episode alerts, the latest in digital marketing news, tips, and tools delivered straight to your inbox. Until next time.